This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to another episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon, and I, of course, am your host, Mitch Lafon. Joining me on this episode, it is the one, the only, Steve Stevens from the Billy Idol band, and he, of course, has done Atomic Playboys and all that other stuff. And he has a new band now called Deadland Ritual, which features Geezer Butler of Black Sabbath, Matt Sorum of the Use Your Illusion era of Guns N' Roses, and singer Franky Perez. The band has played a couple of shows, or played a show, and has some music on Spotify, but a full album is coming later in the year. And of course, Steve Stevens and Billy Idol hit the road this summer in a very, very short tour with Bryan Adams. So Bryan Adams and Billy Idol will be out in August, and to me, as a Canadian, that is just absolutely the most epic tour lineup. I mean, 1983, 84, 85, when I was in high school, from Cuts Like a Knife to Rebel Yell to Summer of '69 to White Wedding. I mean, that was it. And this year, 2019, I've had a chance to meet and speak with Bryan Adams, and now I've had a chance to interview Steve Stevens. So just imagine if this was 1984 or 1985. Man, I would have been the coolest kid in high school. So I'm just, 30-some years too late and still not that cool. But oh well. Oh well, c'est la vie. And of course, this is episode number 2 using this new Blue Yeti mic for serious podcasters. Well, it's interesting because I have to get used to a whole new setup. I mean, the way I had the headphones on before and the mic placement was very, very different. And so I'm sort of doing this touchy-feely thing, and the ambient sounds now you can hear me, tapping on the desk. You can hear me doing all kinds of stuff which you couldn't hear before. And so that is also new because now I have to sit perfectly still and try not to, and I have to not, shout at the microphone, and I have to be careful with my plosives, and oh my God. The machinations and the troubles I go through to get this show out to people, I'm telling you, it's terrible. Okay, maybe not that terrible. I mean, meeting Sammy Hagar, for example, not that terrible. Anyway, the interview with Steve Stevens is also the first interview I used this Blue Yeti microphone. So I'm actually kind of curious. I'm sort of like on your side going, how is this actually going to sound? So hopefully it sounds great, and hopefully you like it. And there you go. And I will, of course, ask you to check out loudtracks.com/Mitch, loudtracks, loudtracks.com/Mitch. I have a couple of t-shirt models up there, and that, of course, is great. If you can check them out and maybe even buy one, it does help finance the show, but it also helps spread the word when you go to a show and you meet a rock star or your friends and they see a t-shirt. And anyway, it was designed by Claudio Bergman, who, of course, did the Firepower album cover for Judas Priest. Anyway, you know what? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking. I know it's Rock Talk, and I'm supposed to do a whole bunch of stuff, but let me just get into this interview because I'm really curious about how it sounds audio-wise. I'm very curious about what Steve had to say, and by the way, I just want to say very much thank you to Steve. Normally we go through all kinds of publicists and this and that, and Steve and I follow each other on social media, and through those connections we connected. And it's sort of an old school approach to setting up stuff. You reach out and it's grassroots, whatever you want to call it. Anyway. What else can I tell you just before I leave? In terms of rock guitarists, last week I mentioned the Brad Gillis solo album. It is in its final stages. It's, I would say, 95% complete. There's a few tweaks and a mastering and all that stuff to get done. No label as of yet. It is hopefully going to come out in 2019. Brad sent me 11 files to check out, or 11 songs, I should say, to check out. And I'm not going to give you song titles because that's not my place. Brad will release information as Brad sees fit. So it's not up to me to start saying the album's called this or the record player's that and this guy sang on it. And well, the sang on it, I can tell you actually. It's Gary Moon who was on Feeding Off the Mojo. So there's a sort of a reunion of that Night Ranger lineup if you want. But it is an absolute fantastic rock record. I mean, these are true rock songs that have hooks and choruses and melodies, and I am telling you, and yes, maybe I'm a little biased because Brad and I get along, but it is great. When this thing comes out and you get to hear the final product, all sort of done slick in the studio with the mastering and all that, because the demos are demos. But when it gets, when all the candy is applied to it, you'll see you are going to love this album. So keep looking forward to the Brad Gillis solo album. If you see Night Ranger or Brad, mention it to him and say, hey, I hear you have a solo album coming, because his eyes light up when he talks about it, and rightly so. And anyway, all right, here we go. Our first, or in fact, our only interview of the day, and yeah. You know what? I'm going to just quickly address that. I have decided, for an abundance of reasons, that the show from now on is going to be one interview at a time. And I will tell you some practical reasons and some impractical, whatever you want to call it. First and foremost, for me, in terms of traveling and getting around and stuff, it became a little too laborious to put together 2, 3, 4 episodes. When I have a break or an extended lunch hour, I can sit down, I can punch it out, and we can have an episode. Second, I have had many artists and publicists say, you know what, Mitch, the interview you did with so-and-so is fantastic, it's great. However, you put it on a pairing with this band, and we don't want to promote that band, or we don't get along with that band, or it just doesn't make sense to us, right? It's not always negative, but the pairing didn't make sense to us, and so we're not going to put it on our socials. So for every reason under the sun, I'm just going to do Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon, one interview. And as I was giving you 2 shows, 2 interviews, I figure maybe I'll give you 4 shows with 1 interview. Anyway, listen, it's going to be what it's going to be. I do have to travel. I do have to work. I do have to do other things, take care of the kids, walk the dog. I mean, I will try my best to give you the same amount of content every week. And if it's once a week, then it'll be once a week. And if it's twice a week, it'll be twice a week. And if I have to do a couple, I'll do a couple. And in the next couple of weeks, you will also see some shows called Encore Presentations. And that is me unbundling interviews from artists and putting them back out as standalones for some of the reasons I just mentioned, but also because I have had fans request certain episodes and they go, I can't find it, and blah, blah, blah. And the interview was last in a 2-hour show and I just couldn't sit through it, or fast forwarding was too much. So I'm going to put a couple of episodes out as standalones, and they're going to be called Encore Presentations. So if you see that in your feed, it says Encore Presentations, whatever artist, just know that those are interviews that are from the past, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and they're just being re-released as standalones. So if you haven't checked them out, of course, do check them out. But the information isn't like, oh, it's June 2019. It'll be, oh, okay. Anyway, here we go. Without further ado, you see that? You hear me talking? This ambient stuff is going to be interesting. Anyway, here is the one, the only guitarist extraordinaire, Steve Stevens. We are speaking with guitarist Steve Stevens' new band is called Deadland Ritual, and of course you folks know him best probably from his time with Billy Idol. Steve, just an absolute joy for me to talk with you.
Same. Likewise, Mitch.
So let's talk about this band, because we are speaking here on May 30th, and you premiered the band on May 28th at the Troubadour. And of course, for folks who don't know, the band includes Geezer Butler, Matt Sorum, and Franky Perez. Talk to me about that first show. Now that you're off the high of having played it and the fans and the reaction you've seen, what was the show like for you, and coming up with some original music to play along with the greatest hits?
Yeah, I mean, we made sure that we were really well rehearsed. We rehearsed a lot. much like, it's those aspects of being in a band really don't change. You just get in a room and, we originally had planned to actually be in the studio and record our album before going out and playing, but logistically it just didn't work out for us. So we said, let's go out and play anyway, and hopefully the fans will be receptive to music that they haven't heard before. And so that was the only for me. That was the only aspect that I was nervous about. Okay, how are people going to react to stuff that they hadn't heard before? And the reaction was just, it couldn't have been better. I mean, it was just, I was really shocked how people hung in there and were really rooting for us in a way, So obviously, we peppered the set with, one song they knew, one song they didn't, one song they knew, kind of, leapfrogging that way. But, halfway through the set, the nerves kind of went away. And we all kind of just like, we're in this groove of like, wow, this is really a great band. And so it turned from any kind of nervousness to just complete, joy. And I think the response was, we couldn't ask for anything better.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so what is sort of the plan for the band? Is it we do this one album and a few shows, and then we go back and do what we normally do, you with Billy and Matt doing whatever Matt does? Or is this something that you could really see yourself sort of getting like a 5-year plan going, okay, we're going to have, album number 2, we're going to do, how do you sort of see it going for the band?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first and foremost, it was never approached as a project. This was always a band. Even in the way that we recorded, there was none of this kind of shenanigans of flying files around and people adding bits and all. We did it old school, the way that we have done it in the past, and obviously, we're taking a lot of our cues from classic rock and the way records were sweated out with guys in a room. I'm really committed to this. I've always wanted to be in a great band with great musicians, and this was just an opportunity in a time that's right. And I've gotten nothing but support from the Billy Idol camp, and hopefully logistically and timing wise and all that, I can work everything out. So I hope that they'll coexist.
Yeah, I hope they coexist too. And of course, folks can check out, and I'm going to read it here, at deadlandritual.com, deadlandritual.com, if you want more about the band. But does this in any way suggest that recording new music with Billy Idol is out of the question and now you're going to focus on this? Because the last album came out in 2014, Kings and Queens of the Underground, which, by the way, is a fantastic, fantastic album. Where do you see yourself going musically with Billy? Is that we're just going to go out and play some shows and do the greatest hits and forget new music? Or is there something still cooking on that front too?
Yeah, no, actually, we had been writing some stuff for some new music as well. So I think the plan is to do new Billy Idol music as well.
So a little bit of both. I do want to talk to you about your guitar style, because I notice over the years when we talk about guitar heroes, everybody throws out Eddie Van Halen and we throw out Jimi Hendrix. But I do think that your style is very unique and very, very particular. So talk to me about how you approach the instrument. Like you take a song like You're Invited But Your Friends Can't Come, and there's sort of two versions out there. And when you hear the version with you on it, you go, oh yeah, that's Steve playing. You do. It's identifiable. So talk to me about sort of what makes you in the sense of stylistically as a guitarist.
One of the unique factors is that I picked up the guitar when I was 7.5, and my dad brought a crappy acoustic guitar home, and I didn't get an electric guitar till I was 13. So all of those years were spent learning folk and blues and flamenco. So I've got a real strong kind of rhythm underpinning as my foundation, much like maybe Pete Townsend or something. So I look at the guitar in this very rhythmic aspect to begin with. And then when I got an electric guitar, it was just exactly at that point where we'll use the ugly word of prog, but all of the early English prog guitar players really piqued my interest because they were the guys that were using or utilizing styles outside of blues-based stuff like, let's say a Clapton or so. They were using classical and jazz, and particularly like Steve Hackett, Steve Howe, Robert Fripp. So I looked at the way that I approach the guitar and apply it to a song much like those guys, where it's not just one guitar sound throughout a song. You're coloring it, you're arranging it, and although my career has been with non-prog music, my approach is still to utilize colors and textures and things. And also I had a great love of Keith Emerson. So people ask, how did the, let's say, middle of Rebel Yell come about? The breakdown, which people think that line is a synthesizer, but it's actually guitar. And that was me replicating Keith's Moog sound. And so I was fascinated with synthesizers early on. And so I think that's kind of what makes me a little bit unique. And then obviously hooking up with Billy Idol and applying that punk rock energy to it. And some of our guitar rhythms were derived from things like Suicide, these kind of repetitive stabs and things like that kind of rhythm guitar thing that happened. I think the first time I did that was in White Wedding and verses and things. So it's a weird, gumbo of different things, but I definitely look at guitar more from an arranging point rather than a performance point.
You're right, because, and the word there I'm going to retain is textures, because you don't just do sort of a straight rock guitar of, sort of 1, 2, 3, here we go. There's all kinds of stuff going on with it. And that's what I find that makes it intriguing. And when you listen to the Billy albums or Atomic Playboys or the other stuff you've done, it really is sort of this oral experience where there's so much going on, so much to capture, and which is why I think when you see a band do a Billy Idol cover song, you're like, yeah, that's but the guitar's not right. It's hard to replicate. Let me ask you about Atomic Playboys. I know it's sort of this one and done thing. You have called it in the past the most expensive hobby of your lifetime, or something like that. Talk to me about the need to make that album, because of course back in '89, Billy was on top of the world. You were doing world tours. You were all over the place. MTV Darlings, the whole thing. Where did you find the time to step out, and why did you find the time to step out in the sense of, well, I can either go back and do this stuff with Billy and make a new album and move forward, or let me take some time for myself. Talk to me about that moment and why that album sort of came to be. It's a great album, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously by then I became recognized as the guy that co-wrote the songs with Billy, and I had already started guesting on other people's records, and then record labels came a knocking, and were throwing around exorbitant numbers, and at first, initially, I wasn't that interested, but then Warner Brothers, actually Ted Templeman in particular, came to New York, and we met up, and I liked Ted, and I loved the records that he did, from the Doobie Brothers to Van Halen, obviously, and Montrose. And at that time, the last Billy Idol record I had done was Whiplash Smile, and I felt, maybe right or wrong, that after the success of Rebel Yell and going out for 10 months and having a shit hot band, to go in a studio and sit with drum machines and sequencers and stuff it wasn't rewarding for me. And it was very hard to fit my guitars in. Now I like that record, but at the time it was really a difficult record to do, to not have real instruments behind my guitar. And also Billy was making the decision to move to Los Angeles. I wanted to stay in New York. So it wasn't like a falling out or anything. It was an agree. I just said, look, I'm going to go do my own thing, and maybe, in the future we'll, hook up, but this is something that I need to do. And once again, fortunately we never slagged each other off. There was no reason to. And when we reconvened again, there was no amends to be made or anything. It was just like, okay, I'm going to do my thing, and best of luck.
And listen, I like Whiplash Smile, and of course the one that came after. What was that? Charmed Life, right? Right. But you weren't on that, which was.
I'm not on Charmed Life. Right.
Yeah, which was a pity, because you can tell that it misses that. Real quick here, let's talk about the Vince Neil Exposed album. Because it doesn't say Motley Crue on the marquee, a lot of folks sort of went, well, it's not a real album, or it's not this. But that is a fantastic album. Talk to me about those sessions and coming in here, because he did the song You're Invited But Your Friends Can't Come for the soundtrack, then you re-recorded for the album. Talk to me about that and working with Vince. How involved were you in all the aspects, from the songwriting to the arranging to the coming up with musical ideas? Was it really a Vince solo album, or was it Vince and Steve and the rest of the guys?
No, Vince was heavily involved in it. It was, as you would expect, a guy whose name's on the cover. For me, it was an opportunity. Let me backtrack first of all. I was signed to Warner Brothers, and when Vince was signed, I got a call from the head of A&R saying, we've signed Vince Neil. Would you be interested in something? And I said, I always look at something, and go, oh yeah, this, I loved the Dr. Feelgood record. So that was absolutely this, state of the art heavy rock record. But I didn't know anything about Vince, and I really didn't. More importantly, I didn't know anything about the L.A. metal scene. I'm a New York guy, so I fly out to meet him, and we got in rehearsal, and I kind of liked, the vibe. And what I really liked was that I was being given a platform to play a lot of heavy guitar, much like with Deadland, because it's although my career was made in the 80s, I was really raised on all those kind of, early 70s, rock guitar heroes. So I thought, this could be a cool opportunity. And it was, Ron Neverson was the producer on it, who was absolutely fantastic to work with. Vicky Fox, who I knew already from Enough's Enough. I had guested with them at a couple of shows. So it was, I making the actual album, and also by the time that I joined, we were also told that we'd open for Van Halen, and it's a friend of mine, and I just thought, yeah, this could be a hell of a lot of fun, and making the record was a lot of fun.
I can imagine. I can't imagine being in a room with Vince Neil and not be fun. I have my own story with him where, after a show in Quebec City, he asked us to go to, the strip joint, and it ended up being an incredibly... Can't imagine, right? Just to quickly back on Deadland Ritual. So you've got this band, but you had done Atomic Playboys, you had done some of the other stuff. Does a solo album at this point still interest you, or is it, nah, I'm a band guy. Either I'm doing Billy or I'll do Deadland, but, enough's enough.
Well, I was actually planning on doing a solo record. Sort of a quasi-solo record. I had done a solo tour in Europe with Franky Perez on vocals. And Franky and I were already talking about doing something, and I was already talking to a label about doing something. Not an instrumental solo record, but a rock solo record. And then Frankie calls me and says, "Hey, I've been having the same conversation with Matt Sorum. Why don't we all meet? Da da da." We meet with Matt. I kind of demo up a couple ideas, based on our conversations, and then I get a call from Matt who says Geezer Butler is available to meet with us, and I think this band satisfies what I would have. Musically, a lot of what I would have done as a solo artist. As I said, I wasn't interested in doing an instrumental record. The last solo record I did, Memory Crash, was instrumental, and I found it really hard work, and not having a singer there. So, I mean, there's some guys who take to that naturally, and can easily adapt instrumental stuff without a singer. But I'm so used to working with singers. I've worked with some of the best in the world, and that's just like my wheelhouse.
Well, in fact, let me ask you about the singer in this For All of Me, Billy Idol. And I'm going to ask you a two-part question, but it's very simple. What has he meant to you both professionally and then also both personally? Because I can imagine the relationship is different in both, but I can also imagine that they're equally as important, right? So what has Billy meant to you? Let's say Billy retires next year and it's just you and him as friends. Talk to me about what he's meant to you personally and professionally.
Yeah, there's a lot of, obviously there's incredible admiration for each other and what we've achieved. And you can't, that's something you can't just fake or, we hang out socially. Our conversations on a personal level are deep because we've both, it's a 37-year friendship, and I had gone on vacation with his folks, and we both have lost our dads, and there's a lot of shared emotional experiences that we've both been through. So in that respect, it's not just a business partnership kind of thing. And I'm incredibly proud of the guy. When I get on stage with him, I'm proud of the fact that he's one of the greats, man. He really is one of the great frontman singers. And the fact that you get in front of an audience and you play songs that have meant so much to people in their lives. A lot of times people will say, my parents are no longer around, but I remember the first time I put on Rebel Yell and they were banging on my door, telling me to shut that shit up. It's like people have been married to it. They've named babies after stuff. It's like, and you want to honor that. And I'm, to be with, somebody in the business for 37 years is unheard of. And we really value that.
It really is.
We really value that.
And I will go as far as saying that the relationship to me is the same as Paige Plant, the same as Tyler Perry. It's one of those where, and I mean no insult to anyone, but I think you sort of both need each other. I think Billy became Billy because Steve Stevens gave him that guitar soundtrack. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Steve Stevens became Steve Stevens because Billy was singing those songs, and it just, that combination, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And we forged a style together. I mean, we really, in the early days of meeting up, all we would do is he'd play me records of Susie and the Banshees and things like that, and, Stranglers that I didn't know about, and we kind of like went, yeah, wouldn't it be great to use a little bit of this? And his love of reggae kind of helped us, do dance remixes for records. We it was us and Def Leppard who were the first doing rock extended remixes, and that was kind of uncharted area. So yeah, I mean, it's my respect for the guy is just through the roof.
Oh yeah, and when you came back for Devil's Playground as a fan, it was just like, oh, thank God. It's like Joe Perry going back to Aerosmith for what was that album, Done with Mirrors or whatever.
Done with Mirrors, yeah.
I know that we said 25, so I'm gonna keep an eye on the thing. So let me just quickly move over to this tour. You're doing a very, very short run, like I'm trying to think here, 8 or 9 dates with Bryan Adams, and as a Canadian, to see Bryan Adams and Billy Idol on the same bill, that's like 3 hours of MTV Top 40. I mean, there's not one song in that set, or either set, that's going to be a dud. It's going to be a massive hit followed by a massive hit followed by a massive hit. Just quickly talk to me about that pairing, and do you think it might be extended at some point? Because let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 9 shows. I mean, do we do more, or is it just, hey, come out and see this and enjoy it?
I right now it's just those 9 shows. We had actually played with Bryan Adams. We played a show in somewhere in Europe. And we all got along really well, and Billy and I got out there. We opened for Bryan on that night, and we got out with him afterwards, and we did I forgot, some classic rock and roll song or something, and we realized that Bryan and I believe his guitar player's name is Keith, and I had been together. We were all standing in a room. And wow, he's your Steve Stevens. They've been together the same amount of time. And so we just, like, a little light bulb went off. Well, we should maybe do something together down the road. And he's an awfully nice guy and one of the great singer-songwriters. And so this made a lot of sense. I think the audiences are perfect for each other.
I fully agree. And in fact, you're playing in Guilford, New Hampshire on August 1st, and that's going to be my daughter's 16th birthday. And last night, my wife and I said, listen, Jada, we're going to have to celebrate later because Mom and Dad are going to Bryan Adams and Billy Idol. That's going to happen. And just before,
and your daughter said, "Who are they?"
She did actually. Well, not to be rude, but she sort of went, But I said, Jada, you'll understand. But just real quick, because I know we're going to run out of time. The Rebel Yell album, that is not just a Billy Idol album. That is an iconic American, or an iconic, album of the ages. You don't have to be a Billy Idol fan to know that album, to know those songs. It's sort of like me being the rock guy going, yeah, I know Planet Earth from Duran Duran. Talk to me about that album and looking back on it. Now, when did it come out again? 83, right? So, oh my God, time flies. But looking back on that,
I know.
First of all, do you think it's held up? And how do you sort of look at it these 36 years later? I mean, it really is a unique piece of work that is, you caught lightning in a bottle on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to give full credit to really the third member of the band there. That's Keith Forsey, our producer, who was really intrinsic, and he he's as equally to blame or to get credit for that record. The previous Billy Idol record, the first one was done in Los Angeles. I had never really done a record before. I was, very lucky to have a producer like Keith Forsey, who was very patient with me. They could have it's Billy Idol. I'm newly in the band. They could have very easily gotten session people to do things that were maybe taking me longer because I wasn't experienced or whatever. But they didn't do that, and I really appreciated that. But the decision was made to do the next record in New York, and I tell people, when you have something that's undeniable, it's there's no question mark about it. We knew once we started writing the songs and once we started rehearsing, we got in the studio. We were fortunate to get in to Electric Lady Studios, which was Jimi Hendrix's studio. I was frustrated with how my guitars were being captured because, I'd bring in classic guitar records, and say, that's what I want my guitar to sound like. And it wasn't, I didn't know how to get that, but I knew it wasn't being captured that way. And And fortunately, we were managed by Bill Aucoin, who was Kiss's manager. Said, "Oh, well, why don't you call Dave Whitman, the guy who did the Kiss records and also, Physical Graffiti and all these classic rock records." And he came in, and within, 3 hours, my guitar sounded like the way I imagined it. And that was really a big part of it. Finally, I had a guy who was going to capture the guitars right. And Tommy Price, the drummer, happened, we were looking for a drummer, and he happened to be in the Studio B with a band called Scandal. So we nicked him. "Hey, you sound good. Come in here, play on a couple of tracks." And from that point on, when we do the playback, we went, "Wow, we've got something here." And it was, we knew it, and we worked really incredibly hard on that record.
And that's the first time in all the interviews that I've ever heard somebody credit Bill Aucoin for sort of helping this come together, because Dave comes in and does the engineering and the mixing. And you're saying to me that if it wasn't for Bill making that suggestion, perhaps Rebel Yell might not have been the Rebel Yell that we know. And that's amazing. So how instrumental was then Bill in everything?
Well, Bill, I was managed by Bill before meeting Billy Idol. I was in a previous band that didn't work out. Bill calls me, says, "Have you heard of Billy Idol? I'm managing him. He's moving to New York." So Bill was the guy that put us together. And then it was during the course of Rebel Yell. I mean, there was some jitters on the part of Billy Idol, doing a ballad like Eyes Without a Face. He's a punk rock guy, and and Bill was the guy to say, try it. If at the end of the day you hate it, you don't put it on the record. Bill was the guy to allow some extended guitar things on the record, guitar solos that maybe Billy Idol was a little bit nervous about, because punk rock is not about extended guitar solos. It was about being economical and getting to the point. And Bill made that relationship work in the early days. He allowed each of us to get our say in a safe form and without just going, "Fuck you, this is my thing." Yeah, he was a great mediator, and he also kept the record company off our backs. He was powerful enough to say, just let them do what they want to do.
Wow, that's amazing. I never realized that Bill was so involved in the process, because as a fan you look at it and you go, well, it's all Billy Idol, it's all Steve Stevens, it's all Paul Stanley, it's all Gene Simmons, and you sort of forget that there's a whole crew and cast of characters in the shadows that make these things possible sometimes. So that's interesting. We are at half an hour, and we said we would do 2025, so I will respect that. But folks, deadlandritual.com, deadlandritual.com, and from the bottom of my heart, Steve, just thank you for, first of all, the interview, but all the music over the years. When you look back and you hear Rebel Yell and Flush for Fantasy and Catch My Fall and the stuff that can't, that's the soundtrack of a lot of people's lives, not just mine, not just my wife. Sure. And yeah. Thank you for your gift, for the lack of a better word. As we say in Montreal, merci beaucoup. It's just
right. Yeah, I'll take it.
I'll take it. And coming up on August 1st or whatever, I am going to make the 4-hour drive. I'm going to see this show come hell or high water, because it is going to be a spectacular evening. And there you go. I'll finish with this, though. When do you think the Deadland Ritual album will be out in its entirety, or whatever?
We hope to finish recording it this year. Whether it comes out the latter part of this year, that's there's a whole campaign that has to be done around it. But we literally in 5 days we head to Europe to do all the festivals over there, and then there'll be some U.S. dates, and we hope to be in the studio and wrap up a record. We have the material, we have the songs, and it's just a matter of getting in there and documenting it at this point.
Oh, can't wait. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. We will catch you online. Merci.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Mitch.
You're listening to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk.